Let me tell you something straight. When your own granddaughter asks you to change your name because it looks bad, that's not a small request. That's a warning. And I learned real quick that day, some lessons don't need shouting. They need timing. My name is Eleanor May Whitfield, and I've carried it for over 70 years. I didn't borrow it, didn't decorate it, and I never tried to make it sound prettier than it is. It came from my mother, and it stayed with me through every stage of my life. The good, the bad, and the parts nobody posts online. By the time this story starts, I was 72 and living in the same suburban Ohio house I'd owned for years. White porch, rocking chair, wind chimes that made noise every time the wind felt like talking. Nothing fancy. Everything paid for. My granddaughter Madison came over often after school. Smart girl, sharp dresser, always aware of who was watching and what they might think. She loved me, I don't doubt that. But love looks different when image matters more than history. That afternoon, Madison sat across from me at the kitchen table. I poured iced tea into the same glasses I'd used for years, and she barely looked up from her phone. She kept tapping her nails against the table over and over, like she was waiting for the right second to speak. When someone stalls that long before talking, it's because they already know the words won't land right. Finally, she looked up. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" I told her yes. She took a breath, then said it fast, like speed would soften it. "Would you ever think about changing your name?" I didn't respond right away. I set the pitcher down and sat across from her. "Changing it to what?" I asked. She shrugged, forcing a laugh. "I don't know, just something more modern. Something that fits better." That's when she said what she'd really come to say. "My friends make jokes about it. They say it sounds old. At school, people ask why my grandma has such a dated name. It's just kind of embarrassing." She didn't say that word harshly. She said it carefully, like she hoped it wouldn't hurt as much if she wrapped it nicely. I let her finish. I always let people finish. She leaned forward and added, "I'm not saying it's bad. I just think it would make things easier." That's when I understood this wasn't about a name. It was about distance. I nodded once. "Well," I said, "I've had that name a long time." That was it. No lecture, no argument, no emotion she could point at later and say I overreacted. Madison smiled, relieved, and went right back to her phone. As far as she was concerned, the conversation was over. For her, it was a suggestion. For me, it was information. That evening, I sat on my porch like I always did. Neighbours walked by. One of them waved and called out, "Evening, Eleanor May." Same tone they'd used for years. Same respect. I didn't correct them. Madison wasn't embarrassed by letters on a birth certificate. She was embarrassed by where they came from, by a life built slowly instead of styled quickly. And that's fine. People are allowed to want distance. What they're not allowed to do is forget who built the ground they're standing on. Because my name wasn't just on memories, it was on paperwork, on ownership, on decisions nobody had told Madison about yet. And sooner or later, she was going to learn something important. You can laugh at a name until it signs something that changes your future. She thought asking me to change my name was harmless. She had no idea how often that name still got the final word. After that day, nothing changed on the surface. Madison still came over, still sat at my table, still scrolled like the world lived inside her phone. If you didn't know better, you'd think that conversation never happened. But once someone shows you how they see you, you start noticing everything else. Madison talked a lot about school after that. Not about grades, about people. Who wore what? Who dated who had followers and who didn't. She spoke in names I'd never remember and brands I'd never buy. To her, life looked like a highlight reel, and anything that didn't fit the frame got cropped out. One afternoon, she showed me a picture on her phone. A group of girls standing outside a cafe, all smiles, all designer bags, all looking like they stepped out of the same catalogue. "That's my circle," she said proudly. I nodded. Looks crowded. She laughed like I'd made a joke, then added, They're very particular. About everything. That word stuck with me. Particular. When people say particular, what they usually mean is judgmental with good lighting. Madison started talking about college next, private schools, out-of-state tuition, dorm tours she'd already watched online. She spoke with certainty like the future was a shopping list instead of a question mark. What she didn't talk about was money. I knew the numbers. I always did. Madison's parents were comfortable, but not careless. Scholarships would matter. Help would matter. Support, quiet support, would matter. And support usually came with paperwork. She mentioned a school event coming up, some kind of networking dinner. Families invited, donors, administrators, the whole deal. Are you going? I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. I don't think so. It's more parent stuff. I let that sit. Later that week, I ran into one of my neighbours at the grocery store. She asked about Madison, said she'd heard she was going places. I smiled and agreed. People always liked saying that. Going places sounded better than figuring things out. That night, Madison came over quieter than usual. She dropped her bag by the door and sat down without her phone for once. Grandma, she said, can I ask you something else? I told her yes. She looked uncomfortable, not embarrassed this time, calculated. For future things, school stuff, would you mind not using your full name, like if you're listed somewhere? I didn't answer right away. She rushed to explain. It's just for forms. Appearances. Some names carry a certain image. That's when it became clear. She wasn't trying to protect me from embarrassment. She was trying to protect herself from association. I nodded slowly. I see. And that was enough for her. She smiled, thanked me, and stood up like the conversation had gone exactly how she planned. What Madison didn't know was that I'd spent most of my life dealing with people who underestimated me. Bosses, banks, men who assumed silence meant weakness. I'd learned early on, when someone tells you what they value, believe them. Madison valued image. I valued leverage. A few days later, I pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in a while, not out of anger, out of clarity. Inside were documents, old ones, important ones, things with my name written clearly across the top, first, middle, last. No initials, no abbreviations. I didn't make calls, didn't threaten, didn't announce anything. I simply checked dates, reviewed details, and made sure everything was still exactly where it needed to be. Because here's the thing Madison hadn't learned yet. In the real world, names don't matter because they sound nice. They matter because they're attached to authority. And the world she wanted so badly to impress? It ran on signatures. Soon enough, Madison was going to attend that dinner, meet those people, shake those hands. And when my name showed up, in full, it wasn't going to embarrass her. It was going to introduce me. She thought hiding my name would protect her image. What she didn't realize was that my name was already on the guest list. A week later, the invitation arrived. Not by email, not by text. A physical envelope, thick paper, heavy feel. The kind of mail people don't throw away without opening. Madison brought it inside like it was fragile. She placed it on the counter carefully, the way you do with something that can either help you or hurt you depending on who sees it. It's for the school networking dinner, she said. Parents and sponsors. I picked it up and turned it over. My name was printed clearly in the corner. First, middle, last. No shortcuts. Eleanor May Whitfield. Madison noticed immediately. Oh, that must be a mistake, she said quickly. They probably pulled it from an old form. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I just opened the envelope. Inside was a formal invitation. Date, time, venue. And beneath Madison's name, listed as her guardian contact for the evening, Eleanor May Whitfield. That was the first time she realized my name wasn't as easy to erase as she thought. She watched my face closely, waiting for a reaction. There wasn't one she could read. I'd spent years perfecting that. "I'll call them and fix it," she said. Too fast, too defensive. I folded the invitation and set it down. "No need," I told her. "Looks correct to me." She hesitated. "Grandma, this dinner is important. People there judge fast." "I know," I said. And I meant it. That night, Madison barely slept. I could tell by the way she moved the next day. Sharp, restless, distracted. She brought up the dinner again, tried to suggest alternatives. Maybe she'd go alone. Maybe parents didn't need to stay long. Maybe names didn't really matter. She talked. I listened. 2 days before the event, she asked me directly, "Are you really coming?" "Yes," I said. She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was when she understood. This wasn't a discussion anymore. It was happening. The night of the dinner, I dressed the way I always had for important occasions. Nothing flashy, clean lines, neutral colours, jewellery that had stories instead of price tags. The kind of outfit people underestimate until you start talking. Madison wore something trendy, something meant to blend in. She checked her reflection twice before we left. The venue was upscale. Polished floors, soft lighting, low music. Conversations floated around us like background noise. Names were exchanged, hands were shaken, futures were hinted at. At the registration table, a woman smiled and asked for Madison's name. "Madison Whitfield," Madison said quickly. The woman checked the list, then looked up at me. "And you must be Eleanor May Whitfield," she said it clearly, confidently, like it belonged there. I smiled and nodded. Madison stiffened beside me. Inside, people were already seated. Sponsors, administrators, parents who knew how to speak in polished sentences that said very little. Madison stayed close, eyes scanning, measuring reactions. A man approached us, hand extended. "Mrs. Whitfield, we've heard a lot about your support." Support. That word again. Madison opened her mouth to speak, but he continued. "It's wonderful to see family involvement like this." She closed it. I thanked him politely. We talked. Not long, just enough. He asked about my background. I answered honestly. Work, commitment, responsibility. The kind of answers that don't sound impressive until you realize how rare they are. Madison watched silently. Around the room, my name kept appearing. Introductions, programs, seating cards. Every time it did, Madison's shoulders tightened just a little more. She wanted to manage the narrative, control the frame, but the room wasn't listening to her. It was listening to me, and this was only the beginning. Madison thought the dinner was about networking. She didn't realize it was where my name started opening doors she never knew existed. That dinner changed something, even if Madison didn't say it out loud. On the drive home, she was quiet. Not tired quiet, thinking quiet, the kind of silence where someone is replaying moments they didn't plan for. She stared out the window while streetlights passed in steady intervals. I kept my eyes on the road. Neither of us needed to fill the space. Over the next few days, I noticed the shift. Madison still came over, still talked about school, but there was an edge to it now. Less confidence, more checking. She asked questions that sounded casual but weren't. They didn't say anything weird, did they? People didn't misunderstand anything, right? "You didn't tell anyone unnecessary details?" I answered simply. Honestly, no extra information. When someone starts managing your words after the fact, it's because they lost control during the moment. A week later, Madison mentioned another event. Smaller, more selective. A campus tour lunch with donors' families. She said it like it was no big deal, but the way she avoided eye contact told a different story. "They only allow one guest," she said. "Usually a parent." I nodded. "That makes sense." She waited. I didn't volunteer anything. Finally, she added, "I already put Mom down. That was fine. I didn't argue. I didn't insist. I'd learned long ago that patience works better than pressure." The day of the lunch, Madison came by afterward. She dropped her bag harder than usual and went straight to the kitchen. "They asked about you," she said suddenly. I looked up. "Asked what?" "About our family, about support, about who's involved." She paused, clearly frustrated. "I didn't even bring you up." That told me everything. People don't like it when your absence still has a presence. Madison started spending more time at home after that. Less bouncing between friends, more scrolling alone. She complained about how fake people were, how everything felt like a performance. I listened. Then came the phone call. One afternoon, Madison answered her phone and froze. I could hear a voice on the other end, polite, professional, persistent. She answered in short sentences, pacing slowly. "Yes. Yes, she's my grandmother. Yes, she was listed before." She covered the receiver and looked at me. "They want to talk to you." I took the phone. The woman introduced herself as part of the school's advancement office. She thanked me for my continued involvement and asked if I'd be willing to attend an upcoming advisory meeting. "Nothing formal," she said. "Just a discussion." Madison watched my face like she was trying to predict the weather. I agreed. After the call ended, Madison didn't speak for a long time. "They didn't even ask me," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "They didn't." From that day on, the balance shifted. People didn't look past me to get to Madison anymore. They asked her about me, referenced me, included me. At school events, I noticed how often my name came up in conversations Madison wasn't part of. Adults spoke to me directly. Administrators remembered me. Sponsors nodded like we'd met before, because we had. Madison wasn't pushed out. She just wasn't centered anymore. And that bothered her more than she expected. One evening, she sat across from me at the same kitchen table where this all began. "You know," she said carefully, "people think you're impressive." I smiled politely. "They didn't used to," she added. Madison thought the attention would come back to her eventually. She didn't realize the room had already decided who it respected. By the time Madison realized what was happening, it was already too late to reverse it. Attention doesn't move like a light switch. Once it shifts, it settles where it feels earned. She started visiting less often after that. When she did come by, she stayed shorter. Less talking, more watching. It felt like she was measuring every word now, trying to figure out which ones still belonged to her. One afternoon, she showed up without texting first. That alone told me something was coming. She walked in, dropped her bag by the door, and stood there instead of sitting down. That nervous energy again. The kind people get when they're about to renegotiate something they thought was already handled. "Grandma," she said, "can we talk?" I nodded and poured 2 glasses of water, same table, same chairs, same setting where this all started. She sat down slowly. "I think things kind of escalated," she said. I waited. She continued, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't expect people to focus on you like that. I mean, not that you don't deserve respect. You do. It's just, it's getting confusing." When someone says something is confusing, what they usually mean is it's not going the way I planned. She leaned forward. "Maybe it would help if we kept things more separate. Like, you don't need to be involved in every school thing. It's not really your world." There it was again. That invisible line she kept trying to draw. I took a sip of water before answering. "I've only gone where I was invited," I said. She frowned. "But you don't have to accept every invitation." That made me pause. "I didn't ask for attention," I said evenly. "People asked about me." Madison crossed her arms. "It's just, people assume things. They think you're more involved than you are." She wasn't afraid of my involvement. She was afraid of losing ownership of the story. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just told her the truth. "When people talk to me," I said, "I answer honestly." She stared at the table. "I just don't want this to mess up my chances." That was the first honest thing she'd said in a while. A few days later, Madison tried a different approach. Softer, sweeter. She complimented me more, asked about my past, mentioned how people respected me. It felt rehearsed, like she'd switched strategies instead of intentions. Then she made the suggestion. "There's a scholarship committee meeting next month," she said casually. "They only like to see immediate family." "Parents," I looked at her. "And? And maybe it would be better if you didn't attend this one," she added quickly. "Just this one." I nodded slowly. "Is that what they said?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, it's just my feeling." I didn't commit either way. That meeting came and went. Madison came by afterward, quiet again. "They asked why you weren't there," she said. I didn't respond. "They said your perspective was missed." She waited for me to say something I didn't. Because here's what Madison hadn't learned yet. Once people start expecting your presence, your absence becomes louder than your arrival. Not long after that, a letter came in the mail. Not for Madison. For me. It was from the Scholarship Foundation. A thank you note, formal, respectful. They appreciated my insights from previous conversations. They mentioned future involvement. Madison saw the envelope before I could put it away. She froze. "They wrote to you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She swallowed. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," I replied. That night she didn't stay long. For the first time I could see it clearly on her face. Not embarrassment, not annoyance, but something closer to fear. Not of me, of losing control. She'd wanted my name quiet. She'd wanted me in the background. Instead, my name had become familiar, trusted, valued. And now she was realizing something uncomfortable. Once respect is established, you can't just ask it to leave. Madison thought pulling back would put things back in her hands. She didn't know the real decision was no longer hers. By the time scholarship season hit full speed, the house felt different. Not louder, tenser. Like everyone was waiting for something to drop. Madison stopped pretending she wasn't worried. Deadlines were approaching. Interviews were scheduled. Decisions were coming fast. And suddenly everything mattered. Grades, recommendations, impressions, family background. Especially family background. She came over one evening with a stack of papers and laid them out on the table like evidence. Forms, essays, letters. "I need you to look these over," she said. I glanced at them. "What for?" "They ask about family support, contributions, involvement." She paused. "Your name comes up a lot." That's when I knew the very thing she tried to hide had become impossible to avoid. She pointed to a section on one of the forms. "They want a primary family reference." I read the line carefully. She didn't say anything for a moment, then added, "I already listed you." That caught my attention. "I thought you preferred otherwise," I said. She shrugged. Things changed. Yes, they had. She watched me closely as I signed where I was asked. No hesitation, no commentary. Just my name, written the same way it always had been. Eleanor May Whitfield. A week later, Madison had her interview. She spent the morning pacing, checking her outfit, practicing answers out loud. She asked if I could drive her. On the way, she talked non-stop about her goals, her leadership skills, her vision for the future, all solid answers, all rehearsed. What she didn't practice was the part she couldn't control. After the interview, she came out quiet. "They asked about you," she said again. I nodded. "They said you spoke highly of responsibility, stability, long-term commitment." I nodded again. "They said you were memorable." She was starting to realize that my reputation had begun walking into rooms before she did. A few days later, the call came. Not to Madison, to me. The scholarship board wanted clarification on some details. Nothing negative, just confirmation. They appreciated consistency, they said, people who showed up over time. I answered their questions honestly. No embellishment, no downplaying, just facts. Madison sat across from me while I took the call, hands clenched together trying to read my face. After I hung up, she asked, "What did they say?" "They said they value reliability," I told her. She exhaled slowly. That night, she apologized. Not directly, not fully, but enough to notice. "I didn't think names mattered like this," she said. "I thought it was all about image." "It still is," I replied. "Just not the kind you can edit." The decision came in the mail a week later. Thick envelope. Madison opened it with shaking hands. She got the scholarship. Relief washed over her face so fast, it almost knocked her backward. She laughed, then cried, then hugged me without thinking. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Then she read the letter more carefully. They thanked her. And then they thanked me. By name. In writing. They mentioned my involvement as a key factor in their confidence. Madison went quiet. She folded the letter and sat down slowly. "They credited you," she said. "Yes," I replied. She didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't smile either, because this time there was no way to pretend. She'd tried to manage perception, tried to trim the parts of her life she thought looked inconvenient. Instead, those parts had carried her. And for the first time, she understood something she'd never planned for. Her future had my name on it. Madison thought the scholarship was the finish line. She didn't realize it was only the halfway point. The college acceptance came on a Tuesday afternoon. Madison called me before she even told her parents. Her voice was shaking, not from fear this time, but from something closer to disbelief. "I got in," she said. "My first choice." I congratulated her and told her I was proud. That part was easy. I meant it. What she didn't say right away, what she waited to say, mattered more. "They invited you," she added quietly, "to the acceptance luncheon." I didn't react. I'd learned by then that pauses speak louder than answers. "It's for families," she continued, "donors, advisors, people who've supported students." Support again. That word followed us everywhere now. Madison didn't ask if I wanted to come. She asked like she already knew the answer, and wasn't sure she liked it. The luncheon was held on campus in a building that smelled like new paint and ambition. Banners hung from the walls, school colours everywhere. Madison walked beside me, posture straight, smile practiced. Inside, administrators greeted us by name, mine included. "Mrs. Whitfield," one of them said warmly, shaking my hand. "We're glad you could make it." Madison stood there, smiling politely, eyes flicking from face to face. People talked to her, sure, but they talked through her to get to me. They asked about my background, my work, how long I'd lived in the area. They thanked me for my guidance and consistency, words I hadn't heard applied to myself so publicly before. Madison answered questions when they were directed at her, but more often than not, they weren't. She noticed. During lunch, a woman leaned across the table and said, "Your grandmother has quite a reputation here." Madison laughed lightly. "She does?" "Oh, yes," the woman replied. "People trust her judgment." That was the moment Madison realized respect isn't shared evenly. It settles where it's earned. After the event, Madison walked slower than usual. We crossed the quad in silence, students rushing past us with backpacks and plans. Finally, she stopped. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said. "Like what?" I asked. "Like you being such a big part of it," I nodded. "Neither did you expect that name to matter." She looked down at the pavement. "I didn't want people to judge me because of it." I kept my voice calm. "People always judge. You just don't get to choose what they respect." That night, Madison posted pictures from the luncheon. Smiling faces, campus signs. But in every photo, she made sure to crop me just slightly out of frame. She didn't tag me, didn't mention me. But the comments did. People asked who I was, complimented me, mentioned my presence. Madison couldn't control that part. A few days later, a letter arrived from the college advancement office. It was addressed to me directly. They invited me to serve on a local advisory committee. Nothing ceremonial. Real involvement. Madison read it over my shoulder. "They want you," she said flatly. "Yes," I replied. She didn't argue. She just nodded. Because by then, she understood something she'd avoided for a long time. This success wasn't hers alone. It carried history, consistency, a name she once wanted hidden. And now that name was standing right next to her, impossible to crop out. Madison thought college would finally put distance between us. She didn't realize it was about to bring everything to the surface. College didn't soften Madison the way she thought it would. If anything, it sharpened her. New environment, new people, higher stakes. Everything moved faster, and everyone was watching. She came home for a weekend about a month into the semester. Bags under her eyes, phone glued to her hand, confidence still there but cracked around the edges. "People ask a lot of questions," she said while unpacking. "About family." I nodded. That was becoming a pattern. "They look you up," she added. "Faculty, donors, advisors." That part didn't surprise me. Madison had worked so hard to separate herself. And somehow, my name kept showing up before she did. She told me about a campus reception she'd attended, important people, future opportunities. She said it casually, but her voice tightened when she mentioned introductions. "They always bring you up," she said. "They say things like, 'Oh, you're Eleanor Whitfield's granddaughter.'" She laughed, but it didn't sound real. "I don't even get to explain myself first." I didn't comment. I let her talk. A few days later, the real crack showed. Madison received an invitation to speak at a student leadership forum. Big deal. Competitive. Public. Her name on the program. She came home again before the event, restless and short-tempered. "They asked if you'd attend," she said. "As a guest." I waited. "They want to introduce you," she continued. "Before me?" There it was, the thing she'd been circling for weeks. She finally looked at me, frustration spilling over. "It's like I don't exist without you anymore." The words hung in the air longer than she expected. That wasn't embarrassment speaking anymore. That was resentment. I kept my voice steady. "You exist just fine." She shook her head. "No, I don't. Not the way I wanted to. I worked for this." "So did I said. She snapped back instantly. "But this is my life." "Yes," I replied, "and it came from somewhere." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. At the forum, the room was packed. Students, faculty, sponsors. Madison stood backstage pacing. I sat in the front row where they'd placed me, name printed clearly on the reserved card. The host stepped up to the microphone. "Before we begin," he said, "we'd like to acknowledge someone whose influence and consistency have helped shape many of the students in this room." He said my name. Applause followed. Polite at first, then stronger. Madison watched from the side of the stage. I could see it in her face, the moment where pride and anger collided. When she finally took the microphone, her hands shook. She spoke well, clear, confident. But something was off. Every sentence sounded like it was competing with the introduction she hadn't planned. Afterward, she didn't celebrate, didn't smile for pictures. She walked straight outside. I found her sitting on the steps, head in her hands. "They clapped louder for you," she said. "Did you notice?" "Yes," I answered honestly. She looked up, eyes wet. "I didn't want this. I just wanted to be seen on my own." I sat beside her. "You wanted to be seen without context," I said. "That's not how real respect works." She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed by the tears. "I asked you to change your name because I thought it would make my life easier," she admitted. "I didn't realize it would make everything harder." I didn't respond right away, because this wasn't the end yet. This was the moment before the final lesson landed. Madison thought breaking down would change things. She didn't know the real decision had already been made. Quietly, without her. By the time Madison came home for winter break, something in her had settled. Not healed, settled. Like a storm that hadn't passed, but had finally stopped raging. She didn't avoid me anymore, didn't challenge me either. We existed in a careful truce, both aware that whatever came next would matter. A few days before New Year's, an email arrived. This one wasn't addressed to me alone. It was a formal invitation from the university. A recognition dinner, sponsors, board members, select families. Madison was being honoured for leadership and academic excellence, and I was listed as a special guest. Madison read the email twice before speaking. They want you there, on stage, with me. I looked at her. Do you want me there? She hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer. I don't know, she admitted. I'm scared it'll happen again, that people will focus on you instead of me. That was the first time she'd admitted fear instead of embarrassment. I nodded slowly. Then I won't go on stage. Her head snapped up. What? I'll attend, I said. I'll support you, but I won't stand beside you unless you ask. She studied my face, searching for conditions. There were none. The night of the dinner, the room glowed with quiet importance. Linen tablecloths, soft music, people dressed like opportunity mattered. Madison sat straighter than I'd ever seen her. When they called her name, she walked to the stage alone. And for the first time, the applause was fully hers. She spoke with confidence, real confidence this time, not borrowed, not defensive. She thanked her parents, her mentors, her peers. Then she paused. I also want to acknowledge my grandmother, she said. Eleanor Whitfield. The room turned. Applause followed. Respectful, measured. She continued. She taught me that consistency matters more than image, and that names carry history, not embarrassment. She didn't erase me. She placed me exactly where I belonged. After the dinner, people congratulated Madison directly. They spoke to me kindly but briefly. The balance felt right. Later that night, Madison sat beside me in the car, quiet again, but this time, peaceful. I get it now, she said. I didn't need you smaller. I needed myself stronger. I smiled. That was hers to own. A few weeks later, she changed her social profiles, added her full name, no edits, no cropping. She never asked me to change mine again, because here's the thing about revenge, the kind that lasts. It doesn't humiliate, it educates. I never raised my voice, never demanded respect, never fought her publicly. I simply stayed exactly who I was. And that did all the work for me. She once asked me to change my name to avoid embarrassment. Now she wears it like a foundation. People think revenge is loud, that it comes with shouting, ultimatums, or someone walking away in tears. But the truth is, the kind that lasts doesn't make noise at all. It just waits. Life moved forward after that dinner. Madison went back to college. Classes, deadlines, new friendships. She didn't call every day anymore, and that was fine. She didn't need to. Distance, when it's healthy, doesn't feel like punishment. When she did call, her voice sounded lighter, less guarded. She talked about ideas now, not appearances. About what she wanted to build, not how she wanted to look while building it. And slowly, without announcement, things changed. She stopped correcting people when they mentioned me, stopped explaining, stopped shrinking. Growth isn't loud either, it just stops asking for permission. One afternoon, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a sweatshirt from her college bookstore, school colours, bold lettering, and stitched beneath the logo, smaller but deliberate. I didn't need to ask who sent it. A few weeks later, Madison brought a friend home for the weekend. Introductions were easy, natural. This is my grandmother, she said. She's the reason I know how to stand my ground. No hesitation, no apology. Her friend smiled at me like she already knew who I was. Madison never mentioned that day in the kitchen again. The day she asked me to change my name. She didn't need to. Some lessons don't require revisiting once they've done their work. People sometimes ask me if I regret not confronting her back then, not putting her in her place, not making her understand immediately. I don't, because understanding forced never sticks. She had to walk through the consequences herself, see what consistency looks like. Learn that respect doesn't come from editing your life down to something easier to explain. You don't protect your future by erasing your past. You strengthen it by carrying it properly. Madison graduated with honours. When they called her name, they read it in full, clear, unchanged. After the ceremony, she hugged me longer than usual. "I'm glad you didn't change," she said quietly. "So am I replied. Because here's the part people miss. I never won by taking something from her. I won by refusing to give something up. My name stayed. My history stayed. My place stayed. And in the end, she didn't lose anything. She gained perspective. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't break families. It rebuilds them correctly. She asked me to change my name to avoid embarrassment. I didn't change a thing. And that changed everything.